In my story, I had a perfect family until I discovered my wife's secret. She was meeting another man in secret, even in our bed at home. My rage knew no bounds, and I confronted them. My world shattered. The need for vengeance burned deep within me. This is my tale of love, betrayal, and vengeance. Welcome to the Butterfly Tumblr Radio channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I never thought my life could crumble so fast. One moment I had a perfect family. The next I was staring at betrayal. My wife, my love, was meeting another man in secret. I saw them in our home, in our bed. Rage consumed me. I confronted them. My world shattered. The need for revenge burned deep. I had to act to make him pay. This is my story of love, betrayal, and vengeance. "Alex, we need to talk," she said again, this time with a deep sadness. She held a big yellow envelope in her hands and pushed it across the table to him. "I'm asking for a divorce," she said. Alex looked at the envelope, grunted, then walked down to the basement. He closed the door behind him and sat on the bed. He sighed deeply, almost crying. His shoulders slumped and he bent over, holding his head in his hands. He couldn't understand all the feelings inside him. Fear blocked everything else. He wasn't afraid of the marriage ending that had happened 6 months ago when she told him she had been seeing someone else for a year. No, his real fear was losing his children. He had thought his life was perfect, like a picture on one of the plates his mom collected. Now it felt like one of those hidden pictures for kids where monsters appear the longer you look. Nothing was what he thought it was. Elena felt like one of those TV characters who pull off a mask showing there's someone else underneath. When Elena told him about her lover, his world fell apart and he saw only monsters. Everything he thought he had was gone, except for the kids. He believed in working hard, putting family first, and being honest and loyal. He thought this brought you the American dream: a wife, 2 kids, and a nice house with a white fence. He thought he had all that. Now Elena was going to take it all away. He didn't mind losing the house and he wanted to lose Elena, but without the kids, his life felt meaningless. They were the point of everything. What happened to him didn't matter. He built for the future for his kids. Letting go of Elena felt like paying off a bad debt, but losing the kids would make him useless, like a new car without an engine. When she told him what would happen with the kids, he felt a deep, sick fear. A drunk friend once suggested he get DNA tests. Maybe they're not really yours. The friend said for a moment he wondered if that would make it easier. Maybe it would hurt less if they weren't his, but deep down he knew it didn't matter who provided the sperm. They were his kids. He wouldn't do anything to hurt them or their bond with him, and he never wanted them to search for a real father if someone else had shared their DNA. The last 6 months had been both the hardest and the most rewarding of his life. Seeing Elena leave or come back from her lover tore him up inside like a turtle with a shark inside. The blow to his pride was almost too much to bear. He had never understood lasting hate until these last few months. But spending time with his kids had been a comfort, even though Alex berated himself for not standing up to Elena and her lover. Spending time with his kids reassured him that a real man always put family first. That's what Alex had always tried to do. He wasn't good with words, something Elena's loyal lover had plenty of. For Alex, actions mattered more than words. He'd worked himself nearly to death to provide for his family. When he spoke to a female lawyer, she told him his long work hours could make his alimony payments higher. She asked him to check how long he'd been working that much overtime. Looking through his pay history, he found that over the last 6 years he'd worked fewer than 60 hours a week, only 3 times, once due to a car accident that had put him in the hospital. Once when his boss sent him home sick to keep him from spreading flu to the workshop, and once when his father died. Alex snorted, as he remembered Elena yelling at him. "You loved your job more than us. You used it to hide from family duties." What a joke. Alex had never loved his job. It was hot, dirty and exhausting in summer, cold, dirty and exhausting in winter. It wasn't boring, but it wasn't fun either. He found satisfaction in doing it well and he was good at it. but working on cars wasn't something he wanted to do in his free time. He did it to support his family. He knew he wasn't good with books and school. He could have probably graduated from a not-great college, but that kind of school and the grades he would have gotten wouldn't have helped him make the kind of money he made. Working in the heavy equipment shop with no air conditioning in the hot Austin summers, he had thought about sales at one point. Salesmen often called him to use his skills to close a deal. They made talking seem so easy. Alex would stand there quietly admiring their talent, knowing it was something he couldn't do. So he always worked as much overtime as he could, and he ended up making more than many middle managers at big companies. Looking at his hands and the countless little scars from years of fixing big machines, he sighed. No one said life was easy, but a man did what he had to do for his family. That was real love, doing what needed to be done, not what you wanted to do. Alex put his head in his hands and tried to stop his tears. He had cried only once, but tears seemed to come when he felt the deep pain inside him. His mind replayed the awful words Elena had said the night she shattered his world. If you divorce me now, Alex, I will take everything. I will protect my children and myself first. Your well-being will not be my concern. You would be paying child support. You would be paying alimony, court costs, my car payment, and this house, not even with all the overtime you have been working. Would you afford more than a cardboard box to live in? You'd sleep in your car or at work and eat cheap food for at least the next 10 to 12 years. If that had been all, he would have divorced her that week. But it was what she said about losing the kids that stopped him. Even his lawyer had told him Alex had seen enough men with joint custody to know. It often meant nothing. The wife might say the right things, but deep down she would want a complete home with her new husband, replacing the ex as the kid's dad. No matter what the court said or what she promised. Soon she'd make it harder and harder to see the kids, always for good reasons. It would go on until the kids believed their father didn't really want to be with them. He might have trusted the Elena he thought he'd married, but the person she had become would likely do everything she could to shut him out of their children's lives. She had told him her lawyer boyfriend had broken up with her because he didn't want to hurt her family, but once she was divorced, she'd get him back. She was still a good-look woman, didn't he read somewhere that Satan was beautiful too? Elena could teach the devil a few things. Alex sighed again. He had done everything he could to make this crazy situation work. He tried to think of himself first, but he couldn't. His kids. Happiness was the most important thing in his life, and he felt he'd failed them too. His mind went back to an article in a magazine that Elena had accidentally left open recently. It talked about how much better and easier it was on the children if one parent died instead of losing one to a divorce. Without realizing it, Alex reached under his mattress and took out the pistol he kept hidden for safety, acting on autopilot. He took off the trigger lock and put the gun in his mouth. The barrel was cold and uncomfortable on the roof of his mouth. The metallic click of the hammer hitting an empty chamber startled him so much that he was flung back on the bed. Alex's brain felt slow and fuzzy, like when he had been on painkillers in the hospital. It took a long time before he realized what he'd almost done with a snort. Alex thought, I'm even a failure at killing myself. Someone had taken out his bullets. Suddenly his whole body began to shake as adrenaline surged through him. He'd almost killed himself. How could that have happened? He had tried to take the coward's way out. He remembered the last time his father had used a belt on him. He'd run away from a fight at school because he was scared of getting hurt. His father had said a man shouldn't look for fights and he shouldn't stay in an unfair one. But running from a fair fight makes you a coward. Listening to your fear will hurt you more in the long run than any hits you'd get in a fight. Some men never learn that. You're going to learn it now. This is going to hurt you more than if you'd been in the fight today. Next time, count the cost, but don't listen to your fear inside. Alex had never looked for fights, but he learned that if he didn't run from them, there were fewer to fight. Looking at the gun in his hand, he couldn't understand why it wasn't loaded. The gun was for protection, and what good was it if it wasn't loaded as he loaded it? He thought maybe it's true that kids are better off with a dead parent than a divorced one, but not with a dead coward. If anyone's going to take a bullet, it ought to be Elena or her boyfriend. She's the one right on cue. The phone rang. Daddy, did you forget that you promised to help me with my pitches? I told Mom I needed your help today if I was going to make the softball travel team, but she said you two need to talk alone. Daddy, please come get me. This is important. If I don't make the club team this year, I'll never be able to make the high school team. Alex's whole body was still shaking from the rush of adrenaline, sitting quietly. A small part of his mind wondered if his words would be as mixed up as his thoughts. Could he even say a simple hello, Daddy, this is important. I've been calling your cell ever since Mom dropped us off here. I guess you forgot it again. Please, if you don't feel like coming to Grandma's, I'll get her to bring me home please. Daddy, I need you. This is so important. Alex's mind was a storm of wild thoughts circling a solid belief. Someone needs to pay, if not him, then Elena or her jerk, but somebody. A small voice inside cried that his kids still needed him, no matter how small his role they needed him. Hurting someone else would take him from their lives, just like if he ended his own. If I'd ended my life, what would have happened to the girls? What kind of man would they think I was? What kind of man would they end up marrying? As he shook his head to clear his thoughts, something in Megan's voice cut through. Was it fear? Was she in trouble? His daughter was in trouble. What kind of man would drown in his own pity when his daughter needed him? The voice in his head now roared. A man takes care of his family, no matter the cost. That was the foundation of Alex's understanding of life. As Megan kept talking, his mind slowly pulled away from the edge of darkness, trying again to clear his head. He shook it. He couldn't remember promising Megan to help with her softball. It seemed like something he'd do, but softball hadn't seemed that important to her. The last time they talked, Alex sighed again, not knowing how important a sport was to his 14-year-old daughter was just another sign of his failure as a father, just another marker of his failure at everything that mattered to him. Daddy, you are scaring me. Talk to me please, Daddy, I need you please. Alex's eyes blinked and while his body still trembled and the darkness still called, Megan's voice held him like a climber's safety line. I'm sorry, baby, I was distracted for a second. I'll be there to take you to softball practice in just a few minutes. What time does it start? Where are you, Daddy? Are you home? Have you seen Mom? Did you talk? Did she tell you? The questions came too fast, too mixed up. All his kids had gotten Elena's smart brains instead of his. Thank God it made him proud, but sometimes it was hard to keep up with their quick jumps from topic to topic, unable to understand or handle what she was asking. He said, I'm okay, I was just in my own little world for a bit. I'm heading to you now. I'll be there in less than half an hour. We can talk then. You know, I hate to chat on these little phones. It had taken more than half an hour to get himself together to drive to his daughter. During that time he figured out that Megan knew about the divorce. He felt a fresh surge of anger that Elena told the kids without talking to him first. So he was surprised when Megan said she figured out what was happening when she saw a do-it-yourself divorce kit in her mother's room a few days ago. She had been scared but wasn't sure Elena would go through with it until today, when she said she was going to leave the girls at Grandma's house for at least the night. As Megan talked, he could see the pain this mess was causing her. The pain in her eyes made his heart freeze. Megan's plea that he fight to stay in her life were like punches to his manhood. In any fight, he knew how to protect his weak spots, but he had no guard against the women in his life. Finally Megan took his face in her hands and, looking into his eyes, said, Daddy, I know that the courts will probably give us to Mom, but there's another way. Since she doesn't have a lawyer, you can go to a mediator. The parent of a friend of mine at school did that and she said her parents actually get along better now than when they were married. It was so good that they still get together as a family on occasion. Please, Daddy, I got the man's name. Please will you fight for us by talking to Mom about this, please, Daddy. So now, 2 weeks later, Alex found himself seated at a fancy conference table with his new lawyer. The walls were covered with awards. The lawyer saw Alex looking at them and said, "Yeah, I've won some big divorce cases. They had several of my cases for mock court at UT Law School. The reason I have those up on the walls is to remind both of us what can happen if the friend process doesn't work. A few years ago I tried to sit down with a couple and serve as a middleman, but the bar doesn't really like that. The risk of me getting sued for conflict of interest is too high. So now I do collaborative law. Your wife will have to find a lawyer who knows this process. So you both have help. You and your wife will have to sign an agreement never to take any of these issues to court. Then we'll sit down at a table across from each other and we'll work out an agreement that will be good for both of you. Of course, either party can back out of the agreement not to go to court, but if they do, both lawyers will have to withdraw and the one who backs out will probably be seen badly by the court." Mark, a big, strong man, leaned back in his chair. "You have a pretty good case. I know the woman lawyer you talked to, but she works in Austin and the judges in our county are much more old-fashioned. Also, while she's good at what she does, her husband traded her in for a new wife recently. I think she should focus on helping women for a while. Even if you get the worst judge in this county, the financial part won't be as bad as she told you, since all the kids are in school. Your wife probably won't get the full 3 years of spousal support Texas law allows. She's also wrong about custody. I know at least 2 judges here who always give full custody to the husband. If the wife has cheated, it doesn't matter what else is going on or what's best for the kids. If you lived in Austin, it might be different. Some judges there don't care as much about cheating, but even in Austin I can think of only 1 or 2 judges like that. Still, things aren't always as bad for men in court as people say. Judges know how important it is for kids to have their dad in their lives. Studies show that if the dad doesn't get any physical custody, he often stops being involved. If the dad asks for physical custody and hasn't cheated, drank too much or been abusive, judges usually give him at least half. This also keeps both parents nearby. Things get messy when one parent moves far away. Since we're planning to sign an agreement to avoid court, you might wonder why I'm talking about what a court would do. I want you to understand that our agreement will be similar to what could happen in court. Alex took a deep breath and said, "I want to support my kids, but I don't want to give Elena any money. Can we do that?" "No, that can only happen if she agrees. That's what collaborative means. If you can prove she abandoned the marriage and kids. You might have a chance with some judges, but she's been a stay-at-home mom. Both you and the kids gained from that, and it has real value. You told me how you worked hard to let her take care of the house. What kind of message does it send to your daughters if you change that now? Do you want them to think being a full-time mom isn't valuable? That's the message you'll send if you try to make Elena suffer because she didn't work outside the home. Is that really what you want to say?" Alex sighed. Not putting the kids into daycare so Elena could make their house a home had been important to him. He wasn't sure when she started her affair. She said yeah, but he noticed that after the kids started school the house didn't feel as warm. He couldn't exactly say why, but it was clear Elena didn't focus on the family as much. She started taking craft classes and got involved in community projects instead of the home. Alex accepted it as part of life. Everyone grows as they get older. He'd hoped she might get a part-time job so he wouldn't have to work as much overtime. He did feel a bit proud that she could participate in society, things like the wives of their Derek neighbors feeling a bit ashamed. Alex looked at Mark in his expensive suit. "I'm not good with words. That's one thing that scares me about all this legal stuff. I'd bet on myself in a fist fight, but I'm not good with arguments. I don't have good comebacks even days later. I'm the guy who takes hours to pick out a card to tell Elena or the girls. I love them. Because I can't find those words myself." Alex's eyes met the lawyer's. They stared at each other quietly. Finally, Mark smiled a little. "I understand words come easy for me, but if I had to fix my car, I'd be lost. Like the good book says, we all have different gifts. A society needs all of them to do well. If this divorce went exactly as you wanted, what would it look like?" Alex hadn't thought much about it. I found a job on an offshore rig on the Gulf Coast. They work 2 weeks on the rig and then give you 2 weeks off. Even with time off, I'd make more than I do now. I could get part-time work here, but only do stuff that lets me be home when the kids aren't in school. I know girls need their mother, so if we could split their time so they lived with me half the time and the rest with their mother, that would be fair. I don't need much to live on, especially if I'm on a rig half the time. So I think I could give the kids 75% of my money after taxes. The rest would cover a small place, car payments and such, but I don't want any of it going to support. Elena. Mark smiled. Under Texas law, the most you'd pay is 30% of your salary for child support and up to 3 years of spousal support. Mark thought for a moment, then asked, how long do you think you'd want to work offshore? Alex shrugged. I haven't really thought about it. I don't want to work out there at all. I like Central Texas. It's close to my family, but I can't see how I could work here and have time for the girls. If I have to work more overtime to pay for another place, I'll be too tired to spend time with them. That's why I'm going to work offshore. The oil companies get over a month's worth of work out of you in 2 weeks on the rigs, but then you're free the rest of the time. The benefits are good. By working part-time here, I can save money for the girls to go to college. After a few seconds, Alex continued, but I don't want the girls to think I love work more than them. I want to see them grow up. You know, Elena always says I just sit around watching TV and drinking beer, but I listen to what's going on too. Elena used to tell me what the girls were up to. Megan and Joey would sit on the couch with me and talk. They'd tell me all sorts of things, stuff I never talked about with my parents. I didn't say much. I just listen. I'd give them advice and I never forgot I was their dad, not their best friend, but it was so neat to see how their minds worked and watch them grow up. Megan talked about boys and what her friends were doing. I was part of their lives. I don't want to lose that. I want to spend time with them, not be a stranger who just takes them to dinner in a quiet voice. Mark asked, where are the kids going to live? If you don't want to help Elena live in your house and you only have a small place when you're on the rigs, they can't stay home without someone to take care of them. Alex's forehead wrinkled in thought. I don't want the kids to lose our house. I guess I hadn't thought about any of this. I just assumed I'd lose everything and Elena would get it. I don't want to pay her anything. I'll buy the kids gift cards for places to eat, but I don't want to buy even milk for Elena's coffee. Alex pressed his lips together. I don't want to pay for her housing either. I want the kids to have the house. I don't mind paying for that, but I don't want her to live there. He looked down at his hands clenched in his lap. This is really a mess, isn't it? Some couples agree to share the family. Home sharing sounds good, but it almost never works out. However, with you being gone every 2 weeks, it might work short term. Alex felt his stomach twist into knots. It wouldn't be bad if she paid half, but she can't make that kind of money and I don't want her to bring anyone else there. I don't understand her, but I don't want my kids to think it's okay to have 2 husbands. Mark looked over the finances since they'd built the house 2 years ago. The market had dropped slightly, most of the 2,000 they'd paid down would be lost to the 5 realtors' commission. They didn't have much savings beyond his 401k. Splitting things would mean selling the house, which would hurt the kids. If this went to court, Elena might get full control of the house until the kids grow up. Alex would then get half of the profit when it was sold. Mark had seen this in many cases, especially when one parent stayed home. Once you're divorced, you won't have any say in how she lives her life, but if it's your house and you cover all the costs, you can have some say about what happens there. If we could figure out a way to get her cash for her share of your assets, his voice trailed off. Would you consider letting her live in the house when you're on the rigs for a time? The free rent might count as some support, at least until she can find a job and support herself. Choking back a bitter laugh, Alex said Elena will never go to work. All she wants is to be a wife and mother. I wasn't enough for her, so she had to find someone else. She'll do the same thing again. I shouldn't have to support her while she lives with other men. Alex paused, realizing he had a new understanding of Elena. I don't get that kind of thinking. I only want one woman. I'll give her everything I have. Isn't that what we promised each other at our wedding? I mean, I don't smoke. I have a good job, and before this I don't remember the last time I drank enough to worry about a DWI test. I don't gamble just a few dollars on a game, never more than 5. I don't even buy lottery tickets because the odds are bad. I don't chase other women, and I've never raised a hand to any woman, much less Elena. I've thought hard about this, but I never thought of it this way. It wasn't just that she had to be with another man. It was that I wasn't enough. She wants more than me. That's why she had to lie. I might not be enough for her, but I won't settle for half of a woman. It's like betting 100 while she only puts in 50. She wanted us both, meaning she'll want more than that guy can give her too. Why would any sane man? Alex clamped his mouth shut and gritted his teeth. Badmouthing others behind their back wasn't his way, even if she deserved it. His dad had taught him better. Mark looked expectant and let the silence stretch. For most people, silence is hard to handle. They can't stand it and end up saying things. They didn't mean to break the quiet when it was clear that Alex wouldn't say anything else. He asked, what if we put in the agreement that you never have to see Elena? She'd have to wait until you were getting on the plane before she could come to the house, and she'd have to leave before your plane landed back here. Alex's eyes showed a tiny bit of interest. Could I say that she'd have to live in the basement where I've been living? Could we also say that she couldn't move the furniture or change things? She always used to move stuff around, buying new things and decorating the house. If it was my house, I wouldn't want her messing with my stuff. She'd be like a guest there. Could I do that? Mark tried not to sigh. His job was always tough, but this one looked even harder. He had to keep reminding himself. He was only hearing one side, but his experience told him Alex was being as honest as he could. Mark knew many women who would love a man like Alex, someone who gave so openly and honestly. He was what people used to call a plain man, and that was a compliment. Cases like this one made Mark's competitive side come out, but he had to keep it in check. Alex was surprised that Elena had dragged her feet about the divorce. She was the one who filed for it, but it took her weeks to start talking to the lawyers on Mark's list. Yet more weeks passed before they could set up this face-to-face meeting. Alex had already worked several shifts on the offshore rigs. It was harder and lonelier than he had imagined until they settled the property and custody questions. He rented a small one-room place in Austin. He wasn't going to live in the basement of his own house. Like some kind of troll. He'd go to the house when the kids got home and leave after they went to bed. Still, Alex felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach, even though he felt better now that the proxy was starting. He thought he knew Elena, but now she was so unpredictable. Mark had worked hard to help him understand what would happen if he went to trial. No matter what Alex thought was fair, the law said she should get half of what they owned. The plan Mark helped him develop meant he wouldn't have to pay any spousal support. Instead, Alex would cover all the children's expenses, food, clothing and medical needs. He would give each girl a nice allowance and even pay for gifts Elena picked out within a certain budget. Alex would also pay for any sports team fees or lessons. The children wanted to try again. There were guidelines to make sure the money wasn't wasted. If a girl took piano lessons, for example, Alex wouldn't pay unless she was also practicing. He wouldn't buy a piano until the child showed she was serious about it. Alex would give Elena a little from his 401k, but in return he'd get the house. Elena would be the custodial parent and could live in his house with the kids full-time. He'd have unlimited access. When he was on shore for up to 3 years, Elena could live in the house during the 2 weeks a month. Alex was in town. She would live in the basement, which would be fixed up as an apartment with a separate entrance. After 3 years, Elena would have to find her own place, so Alex could live in his house 2 weeks every month. In 10 years, when little Nancy graduated from high school, Elena would no longer have access to the house. It wasn't what Alex wanted, but Mark had convinced him it was fair and better than what he might get in a court fight. Besides, although Alex hadn't said anything, he was pretty sure Elena would find someone to marry soon. The agreement said she couldn't have any man in any part of the house, even for dinner. Alex was sure she'd find a new husband. Soon as Alex looked around the room Mark had designed for these meetings, he noticed the quality of the furniture. There were 4 very comfortable chairs around a fancy coffee table. Near each chair was a rolling writing table, like those you see in hospitals, so you can eat in bed. The room was decorated to look like a cozy living room. There was even a gas fireplace to make things warm and welcoming. Mark's secretary had shown them in and was still explaining the room's features. When Mark and Elena's attorney, Rebecca, came in, each holding a stack of papers. Mark said Megan emailed these to Rebecca and me this morning. I just need to confirm that you wrote a journal about what led us to be here. Alex looked at Elena, who looked smug. I wrote those, so I'd remember what was said and how I was feeling while all this was going on. I was trying to explain what Alex was doing to me. When Megan saw me writing the other day, she said she was going to take it to Alex. I wasn't happy about Megan knowing all the details, but I thought this might be a good way to make sure Alex read it. Rebecca snorted. You actually encouraged Megan to send this? Alex saw anger flare in Elena's eyes. Yes, I did. I took most of the personal stuff out. Just what I thought Alex needed to know to understand that this wasn't about personal matters. Mark's voice was calm. You didn't write much about your personal life, but you wanted Alex to know that for the last 4 years you were running Derek's house, doing all the cleaning, washing the dishes and cooking for him. Elena shrugged and said Alex only cared about the physical part of my relationship with Derek and me. I thought if he knew everything, he might think clearly. She turned to look at Alex and continued, if you read how I felt and what I said, it could help us fix our marriage. I knew I messed up our first meeting, but if you read it all, maybe we could work it out. Alex was stunned by what he just learned about the affair's length. Feeling anger rise, he turned to Elena and said, you told me it was 1 year, not 4. You've been with him for 4 years. Elena, eyes blazing, replied, no, I'm not lying. We only were together for the last year. You never cared why Rich and I started seeing each other or why he needed my help. It was all about your pride and another man being with your wife. Mark, looking at Rebecca, jumped in. I think we need a break. To be clear, you're okay with Alex and me reading your thoughts? Yes, I have nothing to hide. I've always wanted Alex to understand how I feel and what I've been through. Maybe then we can build a new, better marriage, if he remembers how much he loves me, especially since Rich and I broke up. Mark made eye contact with Rebecca and said we planned a 2-hour meeting, but we might need to delay until we figure out how this affects our plans. He turned to Alex. You might want to read this alone. It could be better if you stay away from home for a while. Alex shook his head. No, I need to be with my daughters. Elena can find somewhere else to stay. Elena, with an excited voice, said to the lawyers. Alex needs time to process. I'll let him read it alone. Then to Alex, she said, will you read it? Will you try to understand? It could change everything. I don't want a divorce. I still love you, the father of my girls and the man I want to grow old with. I only filed because your behavior was affecting the girls. Their needs come first. Alex looked at her, trying to understand the person he married. Did she always think so little of him? Unable to find words, he just nodded. I'll read it tonight. Elena smiled tenderly at him. Daddy, Megan said I made sure Mom sent it to Mr. Mark. Because I want to live with. You should know what Mom has been doing. She whispered. I didn't tell anyone about the gun. I was scared when I found it loaded. I hid it and was relieved. You never asked about it. Don't tell anyone, they might think you're unstable and try to keep us from you. Alex blinked hard, realizing Megan was the reason his gun hadn't worked. She had known once he thought about what he almost did. It shocked him deeply. He felt hopeless, thinking his kids would be better off without him. But he couldn't let his daughter know his weakness. What could he say? I wondered what happened to the bullets. The gun wouldn't help if it wasn't loaded. Megan seemed reassured as she left the room. Alex sat back and thought about Elena's writing for 16 years. He thought Elena would protect him. As he tried to protect her, reading her story left him speechless. He never knew she had such writing talent. Oregon that he didn't really know her. Mark had stressed how important communication was for a divorce. It took hours for him to understand Alex, but Elena's words flowed easily. Why didn't she ever tell him how she felt or what she wanted? She must have known how much it would upset him. Alex looked around Mark's room, noticing details he missed before. The room felt like a private den with good taste and an atmosphere that demanded good manners. It was the kind of place where people wouldn't scream at each other. He could feel the room affecting him as Elena walked in with her lawyer. She looked beautiful, but looks can be tricky. The chairs were set up differently. Today, he and Elena faced each other with a fireplace on his right. Their lawyers sat at the head of the coffee table by the fireplace. Alex waited for Mark to start. He had spent extra hours getting ready with him for this second meeting. Mark nodded at Alex and then Elena. Rebecca and I spent over an hour discussing how things have changed. One good thing about this process is I don't have to see Elena as someone I'll fight in court. Rebecca and I can work together to fix your problem instead of fighting each other. Our job here isn't to grab every little thing from the other side. We're trying to find a solution both of you think is fair, so you can move on without hating each other. What's amazing is that most clients give up less than they thought they wouldn't get more than they expected. I often have to stop my clients from accepting too little rather than fighting to win more for them. Looked at, Rebecca said this has been my experience too. I've seen fewer problems with kids later. When couples end their marriage this way, if they can split up nicely, they usually work together better. As parents, problems with kids happen no matter how the agreement is written. Our job is to help our clients get in the right mindset before we start talking deals. I use my court experience to help my clients be fair in their demands. Mark and I have been discussing your divorce since you both agreed to this process. While small details can be tricky, like fighting over some beloved item, most couples agree to the overall deal. The lawyers think is fair, but Elena's journal changes everything, since Elena wanted to share it with Alex. It becomes part of the divorce and it changes things a lot. Mark turned to Elena. You need to know any smart lawyer could use this journal to change the settlement a lot. Rebecca and I agreed on what a court might decide. Usually we'd use that to make a deal. Both of you can accept, but since Rebecca is stepping down, we suggest you accept what we've worked out without changes. Rebecca will suggest another lawyer from her firm to help you if you want to make big changes, but if you do that, it will cost a lot and the new lawyer will have to start from the beginning. If you agree to our deal, it will save a lot of money. Elena looked at Rebecca and interrupted, but why are we still talking about deals? She turned to Alex. Didn't you understand what I wrote? Didn't you see how much I love? You said you loved me, didn't you? I know you loved me before Rich. Now that Rich is out of the picture, can't we start over and have a better marriage? Didn't you see how sorry I was for saying hurtful things that night? I'm really sorry. I got mad, but didn't you get why I did? Please, Alex, for the girls. I'm willing to give you all the time you need to change to grow into the man you can be to understand how to keep this from hurting the girls more. Alex froze. How could he explain they weren't even talking the same way? How could two people be married for so long and not speak the same way? They used the same words, but they meant different things. Alex knew what words like love meant to him, but he couldn't understand what they meant to her. Looking at Elena, Alex tried one more time. I was happily married for 15 years. I loved my wife and I knew she loved me. I loved her fully and without holding back. I was the happiest man to have a wife I could love and support. Elena. You lived with me for 15 years, but I was never your husband. I just didn't know it. You may look like the person I thought was my wife, but you were never the person I loved. I don't hate you, but I hate that you made me waste all that time pretending I don't hate you, but I sure don't like you, and seeing you just reminds me of the wife I never had. I loved her. I always will, but as much as I loved her, I dislike you for pretending to be her. Mark touched his arm. Alex, why don't you go to my office? Alex looked at Elena, shook his head and walked quietly to Mark's office. Once Alex left the room, Rebecca looked at Elena. You should know why I decided I couldn't keep being your lawyer. My personal feelings won't let me. This deal is, in my opinion, much better than what you'd get in any court. Here is the rewritten text. By that I mean if we got the best judge on his best day, he wouldn't give you as much as I've gotten for you. My advice is to sign before it's taken off the table. That's my last bit of legal advice. In a moment I'm going to ask Mark to leave, since I won't be your lawyer anymore. I need your okay to talk to you, woman Tuman. I want Mark to stay until you agree to listen to me. I want it clear that this isn't legal advice. Even if we talk about your divorce. If you and Mark say it's okay, I can share some thoughts that might help you. It will also make me feel better. Our agreement means nothing said here can be used in court. Will you agree? Elena nodded when Mark left. She turned to Rebecca with a strained voice, trying to hold back her anger. You're a woman. Why can't you see my side? Can't you help us get back together? Maybe suggest a good marriage counselor. Rebecca sighed heavily. The only person who thinks you should stay married is you, even your kids. Little Nancy told me, and I quote, it's not fair that Daddy has to live in the basement because Mommy has a new boyfriend friend. Rebecca gave Elena a hard look. That once made another lawyer wet his pants during a trial. I meant what I said about the settlement. You better take it. Alex is being nicer than I would be. If I had Alex as a client and got Judge Judy Martin, who helped start the local women's rights group, you'd be shocked at what he'd get. Not only would he get all your clothes, but you'd also be paying him support money. It wouldn't matter if you were living in a cardboard box. Elena looked shocked. No woman would do that to me. I helped Judy start that group and I do it to you. I'm very liberal. I hate it when people say liberals don't care about results, just intentions. It makes me furious when they can point to women like you. What kind of thoughts go through your head? It's women like you that give women's rights a bad name. You never tried to carry your own weight, even after your kids were in school. I respect women who choose to raise a family. That's a big job, but that's not what you did. You didn't use your extra time to help your family or your community. No, when one house wasn't enough to keep you busy, you just found another man to be with. That's what makes Real Housewives look bad. You keep telling me you're a strong woman. Strong women do great things. Can you tell me anything you've done that a weak woman wouldn't? You've told me you want Alex to accept. Have you accepted him? The way he is the way he shows love. Rebecca's eyes flashed. I quote from your journal. I knew from what he said and did that he never loved me enough to ask why. He never asked me why. Because it didn't matter, only being with another man mattered. Had he ever loved me, or did he just like having me? Was it because another man had been with me that he didn't care about me anymore? I cried myself to sleep, knowing he never loved me and never would. I was open to being with Derek, because I knew Alex didn't truly love me. Ours was a marriage of convenience for him. He never gave me his true love. Rebecca looked up from the paper. You thought your first try to explain your cheating went bad because you got mad this time. Alex told you that you changed the marriage deal without asking him. He said he hated you for ruining his family and you decided he never loved you. Do I have that right? Elena relaxed and nodded. That's how I felt. Rebecca gave her a look of disbelief. What will it take to get through to you? You told me Alex wasn't big on words. Did he ever tell you he loved you outside of bed? Sure, not often. He never said much about it. He just said it because he thought he should. He never talked about love the way Derek did. Derek would look in my eyes and make me feel his need for me. Did Derek ever pay your bills? No, God, he wouldn't think of it. He loved me. He never thought of me as anything else. I got mad at Alex for making that kind of comment. Rebecca's look stayed firm. I know I read that. Let me ask you again, besides words and sex, how did Derek show you he loved you? Did he give you little gifts or take you to nice places? Elena shrugged. I know he would have, but I didn't want Alex to find out about our relationship. I was right, because Alex didn't love me enough to even ask why. If he had asked you why, you would have just listed other ways. He failed you as a man. Elena interrupted. No, she paused to think. No, it wasn't really better. It was just different. Derek gave me things that Alex couldn't. They were different types of men. Derek was. Rebecca looked even angrier and jumped back in. I think you said no. Elena stretched the word, making it clear. Rebecca didn't understand. Alex didn't respond to me, like Derek did. Honestly, he wasn't doing much of anything. If I remember right, he mostly fished, sometimes sat in front of the TV and drank beer. He stopped seeing his friends, became boring, right? Elena tilted her head, trying to understand Rebecca's tone. Yes, that's true. He gained weight too, and he just wasn't interesting. He didn't talk to me. He didn't care about how I was feeling. Do you think working 60 hours a week, 51 weeks a year to pay for that big house had anything to do with that? Never mind what were you doing to find out what was going on in his life to take care of him. I think he took his lunch to work to save money. Did you make it for him? Sometimes mornings were the busiest time of the day. Rebecca shook her head, then said, since you cooked most of the meals, did you help him eat better or get him to exercise? I remember you didn't like that. He wouldn't go to parties you liked. Did you try to find things he might enjoy? Just talking to both of you, I know you are better at organizing social activities than Alex as a strong woman. Did you take the lead there, or were you too busy taking care of Derek? Elena winced at Rebecca's harsh tone. If he loved me, he was supposed to put me first too. Doesn't that mean you should put him first too? Can you give me any examples where you did that? Did you put him first when you left the house to be with Derek, after telling him he wasn't a good husband? You wanted him to support you while you were hurting him and everything he cared about, didn't you? Thought you deserved his support while you were causing him pain instead of quietly accepting it. He surprisingly said something mean quietly. Elena said I knew I didn't handle that first night. Well, but it wasn't as bad as you're making it sound. You only realized you might have handled things better 2 days later when you were still thinking about Rich. Even then, all you regretted was losing your temper and not getting Alex to understand that you felt like the victim. Elena bristled. I'm a strong woman and I have to make sure I don't let him take advantage of me if I didn't. Elena saw Rebecca's face turn red, and for a second she thought Rebecca might lose it. Then, in a soft voice, Rebecca continued, do you think I'm a strong woman? I have one of the highest win rates of any lawyer in this state. I was elected 3 times before I retired as a judge. I have 2 great kids and 3 wonderful grandkids with another on the way. What do you think? Of course I knew you were strong when I saw all the pictures of you with famous people. Thank you. I've always thought of myself as strong. It means a lot to hear you say that weak women bring out the. Elena frowned. As Rebecca's tone turned hard again, Rebecca softened and continued. I've been married to my husband for almost 38 years now. When we first got married, he was already a pilot with a big airline, but based here in Austin. He was making good money and I had just finished law school with a lot of debt. I had trouble keeping track of my spending. We got married and we decided to have our kids. Before I started my career, Jim put me on a strict budget. Then, right after our youngest started school and I got a good job in Austin, I handed over every penny I made. Not long after that we had a big crisis in our marriage. A drunk hit Jim while he was parked and suddenly he couldn't pass his flight physical. He decided that if he couldn't fly, he'd teach math and science to high school kids. Maybe help them soar someday. So what do you think happened to our budget? When I was making more money and Jim was earning less. You took over. Of course you had the power. No, nothing changed. I was still bad at managing. Money just slipped through my fingers. Jim doesn't like keeping track of expenses either. His mom did that for his family. But we're a team. One covers where the other is weak. Jim didn't manage the money to control me, but to make sure we supported the things important to us. That's what partners do. Let me give you another example. Jim is an amazing driver. He has great reflexes, depth perception and peripheral vision. He's never been in an accident, but he drives like a fighter pilot, so when we're in the same car, I drive. I'm not as good a driver as he is, but he doesn't get scared when I drive like I do when he drives. The first time I heard other pilots tease him about letting his wife drive, I got really mad, but it didn't bother him. He's strong enough to ignore it, because my comfort matters more to him. We're both strong people. We don't need to fight about what others say our roles should be. This is true for both old and new stereotypes. My goodness woman, did you understand your husband at all? What kind of man did you think you married? After reading your journal, I don't think I've ever met the man you expected him to be. I expect my husband to treat me as his equal. I would be very upset if he didn't treat me with the respect I deserve. Rebecca leaned forward and lowered her voice to make her point, and he expects the same from me. He's my equal too. It makes me so angry when feminists want to replace old male superiority with female superiority or put men down. Jim and I are different, but different doesn't mean better or worse. We are like a beautiful picture with two halves. If you cut that picture down the middle, it wouldn't stay together. But we are like two pieces of a puzzle. We fit together because our strengths and weaknesses complement each other. I give my husband what he needs and I don't count the cost. My world is incomplete without him. What did you give Alex? In your own words, he gave you everything he had, but I didn't see you give him anything. You complained about what he wasn't giving you, but you didn't even give him your full attention. You didn't give him the excitement you knew he wanted that you were willing to give someone else. You didn't give him emotional support, and instead of getting a part-time job, you had an affair and gave to another man what you wouldn't give Alex. I don't know if you're hearing me. This isn't legal advice. It's one woman talking to another. You owe Alex from your writing. It's clear he was never more than fourth in your life. You came first. Maybe your kids came second and your lover came third. If you have any character, you'll do your best to ease his pain or at least stop causing more pain. How Elena pleaded he won't talk to me, and living like this is starting to hurt the girls. Elena, if you were Alex, would you want a woman like you in your life? Alex tried not to show his nervousness. As Mark sat down behind his desk, Mark looked at Alex, shook his head and said, "Why did you ever marry a woman like that, have kids with her and stay married for all those years?" Sorry, don't try to answer that. Her journal really got to me. I got into family law to right the wrongs in the world. It took me over 20 years to realize I was creating as many problems as I was fixing. My instinct is to go for the kill, but when there are kids, leaving someone badly hurt in the courtroom doesn't end it. Part of this collaborative process is that I don't have to act like a typical lawyer. I have to protect your rights, but mostly I try to help you understand what's best for everyone in the long run. Squeezing every last cent out of a settlement makes for a terrible divorce. Take it from a reformed shark. The partner who gets the short end keeps coming back for more until only the lawyers have any money. That's a lawyer's job, the way the court system is set up, but I knew I was turning good people into something bad. That's not what my faith teaches, and it was hurting my soul. With this process, we try to find the best divorce possible, even if my client might have gotten a better deal some other way. I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and I am proud to say that only 3 couples have gone back to court after our agreement and the settlements held up. Each time Alex was confused. What does that mean for me? Since her lawyer is quitting. Alex paused and tried not to jump as he saw Mark start to smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a dangerous one. Mark's smile was still menacing as he began. After Rebecca finishes talking with her, I suspect your soon-to-be ex-wife will feel very low, but I don't think she'll want to delay anything or go to court. Besides telling her how things really are, she's explaining the legal facts to her as well. I just wish I could represent you in court if she's foolish enough to go there. Mark took a deep breath and Alex watched as the fierce look slowly faded from Mark's face. After a few seconds, Mark continued. I read in a book recently that some of the PLS Indians honored their captured enemies by letting them show their bravery by torturing them to death if the enemy took it like a warrior. They gave him an honorable burial and wrote songs about his bravery. What I'd like to do to your wife would make that look like a picnic. Yeah, I can guess what you're thinking, Mark said. Mark took a deep breath, almost turning it into a half laugh. Look, even if that would feel great, it wouldn't last. The issue is you have 3 kids. You'll always be linked to their mom, even when the kids grow up. You can't cut out without cutting them out too. He raised a hand to stop Alex from saying anything. Sure, the kids might choose you now, but that's not for sure. In the long run, as long as their mom hasn't been terrible to them, they'll eventually miss her. Over time they'll want her at big events in their lives. When they have kids of their own, it gets even more complicated. Our job, yours and mine, is to learn how to settle for less than we might want. Alex felt his anger rising like a hot wave. His muscles tightened, his breathing sped up and part of him wanted to hit anything, but Mark's voice stopped him. Imagine you see a man with a knife attacking one of your daughters. He's holding her down and you're alone, unarmed. What would you do? Alex almost felt it happening without thinking. He said I'd stop him. He's got a knife and you know you'll get hurt. I wouldn't go in without a plan. Getting killed wouldn't help, but if that's all I could do, I'd try to buy her some time. Maybe she could get away. Mark nodded. Most men would say the same, but your voice and body show you mean it. That's what good fathers do. It's why men go to war to stand between danger and their family. There's a war around your family. Now the question is, are you man enough to protect your girls, or will you let your need for revenge come first? Alex clenched his teeth so hard. One of his fillings came loose. He spat it out and clenched even harder. His arm and leg muscles turned to iron, begging for a target to unleash on. His eyes burned, but his brain stayed clear. Real men don't only fight with fists. Alex knew this problem couldn't be fixed with force. For over 3 minutes, Alex let his rage fight against the unfairness of life. When he finally calmed down, he gave Mark a small nod. Mark's eyes widened and with a tiny smile he nodded back. One thing I like about being a Christian is, I believe people will pay for their wrongs eventually. There's a part in the Bible where God says vengeance is mine. I will repay. That helps me sleep at night. Here's the situation. You can get almost anything you want now, but it won't stay that way. Elena will soon find someone to pull you back into court if she feels she lost. I suggest we make it look like she's winning, but keep you in control. Full custody goes to you while giving her free access to see the kids. You get the house title, but let her stay there as a housekeeper while you work on the rigs. Provide her a small place to live when you're home. That will replace any money support in 2 years, or when she remarries. She'll need to find her own way. You probably don't want to be working offshore longer than that, and she'll still have unlimited access to the kids. Alex smiled. Doing the right thing for my kids hurts, but it won't hurt for long. She'll find someone to marry her soon. A week later, Elena drove to Derek's new house in Hillsborough. Despite the heavy truck traffic, the 2-hour drive up I-35 gave her time to think. Since talking with Rebecca, everything had happened so fast. She'd signed the final agreement without changes 2 days ago. Now they just waited for the court. The girls would stay with Alex for the next 2 weeks before he left for the rig. Rebecca had told her the settlement was more than fair. The main problem was finding a job to pay for food, clothes and other needs. The job Elena found didn't pay enough. Realizing her life with Alex was really over, she decided to go back to Derek. When Derek met her at the door, he looked more distant than she expected. She hugged him quickly and said, "I need you. It's final. Alex and I are done. I love him and always will. I wanted us to grow old together, but it's for the best. He never understood me. Like you, do we need to plan? I let Alex have our house and custody of the kids. I know you just moved here, but we need to move back to be close to the girls, even when Alex is home. I know I said I'd never leave Alex, but I guess I thought he'd love me enough to stay." After a quick hug, Derek pulled back and looked at her with an odd expression, feeling uneasy. Elena continued. "What's wrong?" "Derek. We talked about being together for years. I know last time we met you said to fix things with my family, and I tried, really I did. Well, we'll have to make the best of it. If Alex doesn't keep his promise, we can take him to court and make him." Derek's mouth fell open. She had never seen him speechless before. After a long moment, she said, "I didn't think you could surprise me anymore, but I was wrong. We broke up." Elena, remember? Elena tipped her head back and gave Derek a look she usually saved for a child who didn't understand something, but she found endearing. "We only broke up because you wanted my family to be together, since that's what I said, to avoid a bigger fight." Good heavens, Elena. For someone who talks about being sensitive, you really have no clue. Do you, Rich? I mean it. You never saw the changes in me that night when you came over after telling Alex about us. I couldn't believe what you told me you had said and done to him. It was like a veil lifted. I saw myself clearly for the first time when I told you I couldn't believe you'd been so harsh. All you cared about was telling me the names he called you. When you said you'd never stay with a cheating spouse. It made me wonder, why would I want one? I couldn't think of a single reason. Not a day has gone by that I haven't wished I could have saved my wife from that accident. I wished I could have died instead of her. She was my other half. She never would have cheated on me. When I remembered how I had loved her and compared it to what I felt for you, they weren't the same. At that moment I understood what Alex was feeling. I knew how I'd feel if my wife had been with another man, much less what you were doing with me, but it wasn't really cheating on him. What we had was much more than just that. You needed me, and yeah, I needed you. I was weak, very depressed. Instead of standing up and facing the world, I hid behind you. I let you create a dream world around you. The only thing I did in those 4 years that I don't regret is going back to law school." Derek snorted. "Yeah, you loved me. You loved a weak man, a man who had no self-respect. I didn't care about anything but being with an older woman. I was planning how to hurt an honorable husband. We talked about love, but did you notice that in 4 years, you never brought your kids to meet me? Did you notice that for 3 years, even before we were together, you never told any friends or family about me? Why do you think that was? Were you ashamed of us? Even then. Maybe you worried they wouldn't understand what we were doing to decent people. If I'd been in my right mind, I would have been disgusted too." Grabbing her arms, Derek held her away from him, looking deeply into her eyes. "I learned a lot from Alex. I looked down on him. I thought he was a man who couldn't control his wife. I thought he was a wimp who chose to live in the basement while his wife was off with a better man. When you complained that he stopped being with you, I had my final realization. I saw how brave Alex really was. We told him he'd lose everything in a divorce, so he basically divorced you and stayed in the same house. We put him through hell and he turned it into a chance to get closer to his kids. He didn't drink or take pills like I did. He just worked hard to build the best life he could for his family. I'd never been so ashamed of myself. Do you know why I'm still talking to you? It's because of the lessons I learned from a man I've never met in person. I will take responsibility and meet my duties. I don't want to be with someone like you, but I owe your husband for what I did to him. I took my pleasure without paying for it. Releasing her, Rich stepped back. Alex paid for your life while I was with you. I owe him. I'm going to use some of my insurance money to buy a house near his. It will be nice and big enough for you and the girls to live in. You can stay there for free until little Nancy graduates or you get married. Maybe Alex won't have to work on the rigs and can get a job here to be with his kids full-time. It's the least I can do. I'll give you some money for your living expenses too. Alex paid for those while I was with you, and since I got something out of our time together, I'll pay for your education, even college. As long as you don't take any money from Alex by paying top price for everything I got from you, maybe I can regain some self-respect. There's only one rule: all contact between us will be through my lawyer. If you contact me in any way, the money stops. Alex was in the greeting card section at the grocery store. Megan was about to turn 16 and Alex wanted to find a card to express how he felt. He had seen many beautiful cards with wonderful words. Alex hadn't yet found the right card. He was looking for one that said, "I'm so happy you're growing up and starting to drive and date. I love you and trust you, but please be careful so you don't get hurt." How can there be a 40-foot wall of cards and not one fits what I need? Alex thought he'd already been there an hour and he felt he'd need at least another. Out of the corner of his eye he noticed a young woman looking at sympathy cards. She wasn't crying, but she looked very upset. It made Alex uneasy. He wanted to help her. He seemed familiar and he tried to think of something comforting to say even 2 years after his divorce. Alex hadn't wanted to date, but the experience made him more sensitive to other people's pain. He often wished he knew how to offer support without giving the wrong impression. He sighed. Not being good at showing sympathy wasn't a reason to do nothing, so he walked over to her, cleared his throat and said, "I'm sorry for your loss. I'll say a prayer for your family." Then he quickly went back to his card section, hoping she wouldn't think he was hitting on her. "Hi, Alex, how are you? Are the girls okay? It's Megan's birthday, right?" The woman gave him a weak smile. Alex hated not remembering someone's name, especially if they knew him. This was very embarrassing. She paused and then continued. "Don't worry that you can't remember me. You saw me a few times in person, but I worked many hours on your divorce case. I'm Catherine Rebecca's parallel. I didn't work for her long because I wanted to see what the collaborative law process was like before law school." Alex swallowed hard and asked, "Is there anything I can do to help? I don't want to intrude, but still the noble knight." "Oh, don't be upset. I mean it in a good way. That's what I called my husband too. His birthday is the same day as Megan's, so I remember it. I'm trying to find something for his mom. His mother and I are still close. Lance was killed in Afghanistan a year before I met you. I'm sorry, he must have been special. The best ones always seem to go too soon. I mean, I was in the service before I married. I know what it's like to lose someone you love. It's really hard." Her expression softened and Alex saw something in her eyes, almost like she was assessing him quietly. She replied, "Yes, the good ones do die young, and it's so hard to find real men these days, men who aren't afraid to show they care." Epilogue. Mom. Nancy called out, adding extra syllables to the word. "Why are bridesmaids' dresses always so ugly? When I get married, my bridesmaids will look amazing." She flopped onto her bed and continued, "Do I really have to go to this wedding? Can't I skip it? I don't want to be there. I won't stand for that attitude in this house. A wedding is a happy occasion. You will not ruin this day. Do you hear me?" "But Dad," she stretched out the word. "This is the 3rd time I'm a bridesmaid since you married Mom 9 years ago. I guess I should be happy. I'm not the flower girl anymore." Seeing his look, she blushed slightly. She wouldn't have complained if she knew her father could hear her. She stood up and walked over to Catherine, hoping he'd walk away. Catherine knelt down to pin the hem of her dress so she could sew it later. "John, we've got this under control. It's a bridesmaid's right to complain about her dress. She wasn't breaking your rule about saying anything bad about Elena. It's just wedding nerves. Remember how you felt when Megan got married? That's right, Dad. It's just the dress. I'm really glad Mother found someone. Maybe this one will last. As Alex left, Nancy giggled at her stepmother regaining her composure. She asked, "Do you want me to stand on a chair? Seeing you kneel like that makes me worry. My baby brother will pop out." Catherine patted her belly. I should be so lucky. They say the first child is the hardest. Her expression turned wistful. I hope your mother finds what I have with your father. Nancy took Catherine's hands in hers. Dad was lucky to find you. We were all lucky to have you. There's a reason we call you Mom and her mother. You've shown us what a strong woman is by always being there. Dad may not be great with words, but when I see him look at you, I know he thinks you his perfect woman. Nancy bit her lip and squirmed a bit. Then asked Catherine, I love my dad and think he's the best. But well, you're a beautiful lawyer with many awards. You make more money than Dad. Don't some of your friends think you married down? Catherine's eyes flashed. Not if they are really my friends. Look, no one can take credit for their intelligence or gifts. You're born with those, God gave them too. You didn't earn them. The marketplace decides the value of those gifts. The market isn't always fair. Why do singers make more than teachers? The real way to judge someone is by how they use their gifts. Your father is the world's best mechanic, period. He became that because of his character, heart and hard work. Be strong enough to never settle for something just okay. If you can have something great in another area, it doesn't matter if someone is the best judge or the best janitor. Being the best at what you do is always special. Oh, and don't be so sure about who makes the most money. People will always pay for the best. Even if you're just the best burger flipper in the world, you might end up owning the place. Look at your dad now that he has his own shop. You might be surprised at how much he makes. A good, honest mechanic will always have customers. I'm so lucky to have found your father. I wanted to be the best wife and the best mom. Dropping her voice, she continued. You girls were so great. It was easy, but I'm a bit scared about starting over with a baby boy. Nancy swallowed a few times to clear her throat, then continued in a lighter tone. There's only one man like Dad. Okay, Megan got lucky too, but they don't make them like Dad anymore. I know I've been meeting a lot of frogs lately. Catherine stood up with a gentle smile and said, you're lucky because you know what to look for in a man. Your dad showed you that there are good, strong men out there. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a true warrior and a bully or someone who just brags, but if you take your time, you can figure it out. Your dad showed me what kind of man he was when he and your mother were separating. I knew it would take him some time to be ready to move on, but I kept my eye on him. You don't want to let the good ones get away. I didn't plan to meet him in the card section of a grocery store, but when he tried to cheer me up, I knew it was the right time. Nani's face turned serious again. You never know who's watching you. Do you? I mean, if Dad hadn't been so noble during the divorce, he wouldn't have gotten you, would he? I know some of the good ones. My age haven't finished growing up yet. You've also convinced me that they are worth waiting for, and I will. I'm so lucky to have you in my life. You've taught me how to be the kind of woman a strong man needs. I love you. Mom. Nancy placed her hand on Catherine's stomach and felt the baby move. Don't worry about him, because you are the world's best mom. Until I'm ready to take that title. The baby kicked, making Catherine's stomach ripple, and both women smiled. I love you. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.